Hi, Sylvain.
Hello, Claire.
We're doing this recording on well, it's on death really. The title is Life, Death, and Everything in Between.
Yeah.
But the original inspiration was to talk about dying. It's a topic that is often avoided. It's quite a delicate topic, and people sometimes find it quite uncomfortable to talk about. We quite like to challenge ourselves and talk about everything, because actually death is a topic as much as life is, as much as anything is. So it's lovely to have you here today, and we're going to talk about dying really, and
Oh,
explore what we mean by this. What is it? It happens to everyone. There's a lot of fear around it, particularly people who are being given a terminal diagnosis. There can be quite extreme fear. Maybe you want to share a bit about your experience. I know you've had some health scares in the past, and you've sort of been at times thinking you were dying. How did you manage that, or anything else you
well,
want to share?
no, I think that actually is really interesting because we did come across it because recently, in fact, I had some medical news which, on first instance, were not looking that hopeful for me. I mean, it's also the fact that I'm 80 years old, and anybody of that sort of age has got to think that one moment or the other, death will arrive. And I'm lucky because I'm quite friendly with death. It's not something which worries me. So what really I'd like to share with other people is maybe something which is a bit more my view of things and my experience of it. Simply because I believe that if people look into it and see the same thing as I do, gosh, I mean, death is something to look forward to, not to be terrified of. And in view of my experience and my thoughts about it, I think that if only we could be friendly with death right at the youngest possible age, it would change totally the way we deal with life.
Sylvan,
And and
I've got to interrupt you there. Death is something you're looking forward to. I really have to probe a bit more into that because that sounds a little bit morbid. You're not depressed, are you?
no, I know it sounds morbid, but it's only because we tend to avoid looking at it and studying and being interested in it. And I think that is actually hiding from us a reality of life, which is so important. Because if you imagine that actually, who worries about being born? We take it in our stride. That's the way it works. And for some reason, because we don't know what happens after death, we imagine that it's something very bad. And for that reason, people want to shy away from it. I mean, I've got many friends or people I've met who actually either their health is bad or somebody in the family have got very bad health. And I think the general view is that illness kills you. Well, I'm sorry to say that actually illness doesn't kill you because whether you're ill or not, you will die at some point. So we need to separate things in a way and look at death as something really specific and illness as something specific as well. Because illness, if you forget death about it, you need to address the illness. And if you just focus on that, try to make it better, whatever, that's all you need to do. You don't need to look at it as a killer.
Well, why don't you share a bit more about what happened with you then? So you had a recent scare.
Yes, I mean, if you've got to put it into context, first of all, it's my age. Secondly, the fact that actually I've got cancer before, the prostate cancer, which seems to be okay for now. I've had a heart issue, which has been dealt with. So there are chances that actually at some point, some of those things will break up. And when I had a checkup recently with scans and everything like that, it was discovered I had actually 7 lesions in my body or tumors. So that was not very encouraging to start with. However, having explored that in more detail, none of those things are lethal as they would, people will actually see. But they all exist, and therefore we need to address them separately and do something about them. But that really brought me to the fact that without being frightened of dying, to address those issues is so much easier because you can accept that actually maybe something will not work out in your body, but that's okay because it is the way it works. I've spent a large part of my life looking at nature and to look at the famous cycle of life. I mean, it's so helpful. Look at everything lives. Actually, there is a birth, there's a growth, there is a decay, and there is a transformation we call death. And death is something we think is horrible. But why should it be more horrible than being born?
Yeah.
It is part, of the cycle, and we can see it in everything. And when you look at the cycle, when the cycle seems to end, well, it goes into hiding, but something grows out of it again. So it is not like actually, why would we be different than anything else in nature?
I thought it was very illuminating when you told me about the potential, the fact that the cancer may have come back, and you said, well, actually, I'm on a journey. This is something that's happening, and I'm sort of looking forward to exploring this journey. I mean, that's a very refreshing. I really know this. It's sort of a very deep spiritual insight you have around life and death, and I know you long enough to know that that's the way that you live in line with this deep awareness and understanding of the way things work. But this is quite an unusual attitude to take, when the sort of almost enjoyment of the moment, the okay, well, it's a process, this is all a process. A lot of people are very afraid, they get a terminal illness and there's a sort of a deep fear. It's the unknown, it's the uncertainty. And actually the way you approach it, and it did turn out to be okay, was so refreshing. It was so unusual. And I think that's wonderful. How did you learn to come to terms with dying and death? You say actually I'm sort of looking forward to it, not in a morbid way, but it's actually okay. How did you learn to accept death as something that happens and something that you're not afraid of?
Well, I mean, mainly because I wanted to understand it. It's become something I wanted to know because, like everybody else, I was frightened of it, and I discovered that my main fear of death was actually what I'd been told by other people. I've got a suspicion, it's only a suspicion because I can't prove it right now, but you can all look into it. Is we are sold the idea that death is terrible and it's the end of everything, and it is actually part of society. And really, if people are in a situation, it's so much easier to manipulate people. And I think that actually, because if you look at the fact that it's nature which decides, it's not us people, you realize actually the more you look at nature, the more you look at that cycle I was talking about earlier, the clearer it becomes that actually the best bet that anybody has is to give in and trust nature. It knows what it's doing much better than we do. And I've grown to actually really be in love with nature because you can observe it. It's not hiding anywhere. It's not trying to sell you anything or manipulate you in anything. It's just offering you an opportunity of an experience, and at the same time, if to actually be able to meet life and to look at it because it's there everywhere around us. All we need to do is to observe, look, and then we understand things and we become closer and closer to that incredible, wonderful, opportunity. And therefore, there is no need really to be frightened of anything. I have no idea what might or might not happen after death. I must be clear about that. But at the same time, I don't mind that. Because I'm sure it will be in line with everything else I've observed in life.
Mm. And you're so right, Sylvain, because from day one we are sold things, we're marketed things, we're told things, and it becomes so important that we are an identity, a person. We're connected with all these things that we have, and death seems like the ultimate end. If you're told that you are the car you drive and the salary that you have, if you're told all these things about yourself, then when it does come to the end of your life, you almost forget that you're a natural organic human being. You think, well, I'm this person and I'm all these achievements and I'm all these success stories. And then you think, well, I'm actually dying. And I wonder if maybe that's what you're alluding to. Sometimes the fear of death is the fear of the loss of the material things that we take to be ourselves. And what you're saying is, well, when you're connected to nature, it's almost a sort of total cycle. There almost isn't a death. If you see it in that way, it's something that you're just naturally a part of. What actually does die if you break it down like that.
You're so right, in effect, because just imagine for a moment that one is not frightened about death at all, and then the one is actually and part of life, and accept that we are part of life, that we're not in control, we're not the masters, we are to some extent participants. And then the more willing participant we are, the better it is. Life is not trying to make us do anything we don't want to do, but it's actually showing us quite clearly what we should be dealing with, which is very simply making sure life is successful, because that's our best interest as well. Now, if you actually consider that that death in that case is part of a cycle, it's no longer an end per se, it's just part of being alive, then there is no more urgency. So things like actually what you want to become is not that important. The time is not that important because it goes on anyway. So there is no rush. There is nothing to be proven. It's just actually we're just here to enjoy being alive. So the instead of being under pressure, and because people, when we are frightened of death, we want to actually pack in as much possible before we do die, and then we've got that pressure on us to want to achieve all those things. And the wanting to achieve is the worst things we can do for ourselves, because we are totally, utterly, and completely unsatisfied, dissatisfied for all our life, because we never get
Yeah.
there.
Yes,
And,
yes, we
and
never actually live.
that's right. And then you really pointed out that actually having been successful up to a point, because nobody's totally successful, that doesn't exist. But so there we are. You've still managed very well, and you're very good. You still would like more time. You still would like more opportunities, but you come to an end, and then you've got to give it all back. So everything you might have done, and you might think you are, you've got to abandon behind because you're moving on.
And
And maybe,
ultimately, sorry to interrupt you.
no, that's
Uh,
okay. You go ahead.
it does feel as if, at that point you can die before you die. I've worked in two hospices, Sobel House and Catherine House, and then you see a sort of almost the most alive. There's an aliveness often when people come to a point where they accept the end. I feel like that's where they actually live, because there's not, as you say, there's not that seeking, there's not that I need more, I need to be promoted, I need a better car, a better wife, a better husband, a better this, that, the other. There's not that striving to get anything else. There's not that pressure of time anymore. And we're alive until we're not alive. It's not like you come to the end of your life, you have a terminal diagnosis, and that's it. You can still enjoy life. You can still really be alive. I mean, I think pain is one thing we might talk about at some point, but if there's not pain and if the pain's managed, then there is a deep aliveness, which is almost in a way a death. The death of the old identity, the death of the seeking and the striving to be someone, because actually you've realized that this is who I am, this is who I'll ever be. And if people can get to that place, I think there's a real beauty and a peace that can come with that.
I mean, so true. And I think that actually, if one's got an opportunity to be with somebody who is not dead yet, but who might die, I mean, it's so lovely to be close to somebody like that. You don't need to be frightened of it. It's not. There's nothing worried about it. It's all going to our stride. It's like being born again to a large extent, And I think there's also something which is very important: is not to mix illness with death. They're two very separate things. So many people believe that illnesses kill us. Illnesses that do not kill us, we die regardless whether we're ill or not. So there are two things very different, because you can't do very much about death, but you can do something about illness. And this is actually one of the wonder of being alive, to find out that actually when you are ill, the value of human beings, what we're able to do because we're gifted with it, not because we made it ourselves, but we are able to help so much in diminishing the effect of illnesses. And there is no doubt that actually, we can do more. So it's never to give up. Oh, I'm going to die anyway, so there's no point. Like if we said that cancer kills us, no progress would have been made with the, dealing with some cancers. It's only come from the fact that some people always say, well, we must do something about it. And then we have. So, as I said, do not sort of confuse illness and death. They're two separate things altogether. Death really is something we need to deal about separately, and to understand that we are part of that cycle, and that cycle is wonderful. So we shouldn't worry about that. We can relax, as a friend of mine used to say, go with the flow. It's exactly what it's all about. We've got to trust life. I mean, and after all, we were born, we lived. I mean, it's nothing to do with us. I mean, it happens. So that's worked out very well. There's no reason why it shouldn't carry on that way.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting you say about the being around people who are very ill or coming towards death. There's almost a sort of a fear of something catching, if somebody's been given a terminal illness, as you say, you can still sometimes people have miraculous recoveries. If someone's been given a diagnosis, it doesn't mean it's the end. That's the you're so right to differentiate illness and death. And people see illness as sort of the precursor of death. Once you've gotten ill, oh, yeah, that's it. Might as well give up now. And it's such a shame. I mean, we're all dying. All of us have got a terminal illness. It's called being human. So it's quite strange how it seems to be a sort of construct, a mental construct. Being ill creates this, and I wonder if that also happens internally. If you get given a label, a diagnosis, you start thinking, oh, I'm ill, I'm dying, and that sort of creates a lot of fear, a lot of negativity, a lot of stress, and that can also contribute to a sort of lack of vitality that's not very healthy. So I think it's great that you can pull those two apart. And yeah, I think it's great we're having this conversation, because I do think in our society there is a real fear of death and illness. And as you say, there's a constant, we're living so much longer, there's a constant, we need to stay alive, and that's wonderful. But sometimes it can be we're almost afraid of death as a society. We want to keep staying alive because we're just so afraid to die, and that can also be driving that at the same time. So as a collective, there's a strong message, which is that death is a very scary thing. So I think having these conversations and hearing your perspective puts a different spin on it, which might be quite reassuring for some people, that it's not seen like that everywhere.
No, I know. The other thing which actually is terribly valuable, I find, is, uh, I mean, I know it's like my image about death. I mean, when you are ill, I know it's not pleasant necessarily, but you discover some amazing aspect of your body. I mean, I take it for my case, for example. I've got a problem with my spine, which actually is affecting the way I walk. Now, I'm like a drunken man, like a sailor on a ship in a storm, and because of that, I've got to ask myself, "Oh, wait a minute, how is it working? How can I actually compensate for this? How can I make sure I'm not falling? And then you discover how, I mean, late in life, how your body works. How in fact, every part of you has got their own mind. Because I know with my sort of my brain, I can actually uh, tell my legs to move in a particular way. I can check they are moving the right way. But before I had that issue, my legs would actually move very well by themselves without anybody telling them anything. So it's so incredibly interesting for me to see the beauty of our engineering, in effect. And I think in doing that, we actually, to some extent, support the research in medicine and how we can improve. Because the more we understand how we function, the more it becomes possible to repair, in effect, what's happening. For me, that's what illnesses are about. It's actually you're like a car. You've got problems with it, and you've got to find out where to repair it. and hopefully you can. If you can't, you'll have to find something to do it, or we're so gifted to make that progress,
Mm,
and when you've done that, I think that actually almost you take it with you when you die, funnily enough. You don't take your titles, you don't take your money, you don't take your possession, but you certainly take your what you've discovered about life with you.
mm.
and
Yeah.
and because that is something it's part of you, and
Mm,
you've become that. And
yes.
that's my way of seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I work with clients in their 70s, and they say, "Oh, is it too late? You know, am I too late?" Even their 80s, and no, it's never too late. I had a client who had had a terminal illness, and all she wanted was to express some things that she'd never expressed before. That she wanted to see life in a particular way, and it was only at that point where it was understood that, oh, this is actually what life is. You know, all those years we spend rushing around and trying to be someone, trying to be important, and creating stress for ourselves and other people. And you get to a certain point and you say, I'm just sitting here listening to the birds. I'm just saying, holding my daughter's hand. I'm having a conversation, having a cup of, there's little things that can be noticed. And there's a sort of release sometimes when there's a loosening of that identification. And I think, yeah, that can come at any point, and it's not too late, and it's not like time's been wasted. It's something that you will experience, and yeah, it's sort of maybe it's something you take. You always have that. It's an experience you. We don't know what happens after we die, right? We don't know where we go
No.
with all this.
Yeah. No, but that discovery, I mean, what you were talking about just now, the greatest discovery and the greatest, I think, fortune you can get is the day. It could be 2 seconds before you die, it doesn't matter. It's actually the moment you say, I am, to just to be a human being, just that. No, no, you don't need any other thing to be a marvelous creation. You contain all those amazing qualities and all that ability to experience. You don't need to know more than that. If the day you realize that actually this is all there is, but that in itself contains everything else, you can't get more than that.
Yes, yes. Well, there's a lot of people who talk about near-death experiences, and we'll need to come to an end soon. But I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I do find this all very reassuring. There's and it's not sort of looking for some concrete answer, because nobody has a concrete answer. All we do is we tell stories and we share experiences, and there is some things that we have a resonance with. There's a sort of felt sense of, I don't know exactly. It's like sort of hearing poetry or a song, or there's a sort of calming reassurance. Nobody has been dead and come back with a trophy and a signed certificate from God. This is exactly what heaven looks like. It's just, it's not possible by the very nature of it. But what you hear about is there are these experiences people have where there's a sense of peace. There's a sense of something that's obviously nothing, but it's still something. And it's quite reassuring in a way. And as you say, even if it's a few moments before death, it's even that recognition of being something, being human, being life, being alive. And yeah, it's I don't know really what else to say. We're very identified I don't want to die. I think as a human mammal, it's like with any animal. There's a sort of a desire to live. There's a desire to survive. But I think what we have as humans is we've got the capacity to intellectualize, to talk, to have conversations. So we can have these sort of philosophical discussions, and we can come to a place that other animals can't, perhaps, where there can be more of a, it's okay. There's a sort of, you can override the mammalian fear to a degree, perhaps. Um, and yeah, I don't want to sort of become a Pollyanna about this whole thing, oh, it's all wonderful, la-di-da. But actually, there's an acceptance, I think, more than a celebration of death. It's okay kind of thing. And I don't know if you said you're looking forward to it, so maybe you're expecting a bouncy castle and a big cake. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what we're going to
I just find that actually, we shouldn't really make any difference between life and death. There isn't any. It's a continuum.
Mm,
So, because everything is on the continuum, there's no reason why that should be different. I think that the invention of death, I mean, which is obviously reflects what people observed, because we all die, of course, uh, is actually is definitely being used as a threat, for example, to allow saying I can protect you against death. You're going to work for me from a very long time in the past. I think that's been is why it's actually so important. It
it's a
it
really good
is
point.
it is the carrot and the stick for anybody who wants to control a crowd.
Mm,
And I think that's been really exploited. And the image of death, it's not actually everywhere a terrible thing. There are quite a number of civilization or philosophies of religion who've actually said death is a great thing. That because, but never just accept it. It's because you're going to heaven or something like that, which is a different discussion altogether. Without all those promises, I think that actually just to accept that it is actually what nature decides and that we can't argue with that, and that try to actually understand what we can see when we're alive, how nature works, and to accept that actually why wouldn't carry around that way, you know?
Absolutely. I have to jump in there quickly with a psychotherapeutic point as well. This is a it's a occupational hazard. I'm thinking about the pet our attachment to our parents as well. All throughout our childhood, there's this idea that mum and dad will take care of us. We're safe from death. Nothing bad's going to happen. And there's also a part of us that when we come to true adulthood and individuation, as Jung might say, we come to a place where we see that there is total freedom. We're not we step away from maybe the ties of our family. We don't feel we're being protected from death. Might be a big fear. We're sort of we're adult, we're able to go out there and cope in the world. And with that can come a sense of sort of individual autonomy. A bit like you're saying with the society, there's a sense of I don't need to be connected to anything that's being told to me that I am. I'm my own individual person. And then when it comes to the end of one's life, there's a sort of sense of freedom, a kind of stepping into that. I have to think of the psychologist Yalom, who says that the fear of death is the source of all neuroses. People are sort of frantically, the anxiety, the stress, the depression. It's all a fear of death. And when you step out of that fear, you can actually have a truly joyful and meaningful life. It's not, you don't need to be sort of caught in these confines and looking for other people to rescue you. I want you to keep me safe, whether it's the mum, the dad, the boss, the big cheese somewhere in the city, whoever the government, whoever it is who you think's in charge. You're in charge, we're in charge. There's such a freedom and a liberation that comes with seeing we're in charge, but with that also comes a responsibility and an awareness of we're just humans. There's no ultimate authority, which is maybe a source of fear, but also a great source of liberation. Um, I just had to put that one out there.
Well, it's a very good point that you've made because at the end of the day you actually can accept death and then it disappears in effect. That it's part of life. You also realize that actually for the first time you do not longer have parents. You've actually grown up and you are an individual, and then you're totally in charge of yourself. You are in charge without fear because otherwise it's still being stuck in the past.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. You've opened the curtain, you know?
yes.
Uh,
Well, it's wonderful. It's a real fearless place, and I don't know if anyone listening feels sort of similarly. But if it's a great topic, I think we'll keep talking about it. And if anyone has any questions or things they'd like to ask or share, would be so happy to hear from anybody. I think this will be a live discussion, a sort of active conversation, because it is such a big topic. And I think you talk about it beautifully, Sylvan, and I'm so glad to have met you. And I look forward to continuing to talk around this.
Wonderful.
Mm. Okay, should we leave it there?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you very
Okay,
much for your time.
thank you.